Introduction: on an ordinary summer day in 1997, American Airlines Flight 50 took off from Miami, Florida, destined for New York's JFK International Airport. The aircraft, a McDonnell Douglas MD-11, carried 165 passengers and crew members, all expecting a smooth flight across the eastern seaboard of the United States. However, what unfolded in the skies that day became a harrowing reminder of how quickly things can turn in the world of aviation. As passengers boarded Flight 50, the bustling activity at Miami International Airport filled the air. Families, business travelers, and tourists alike settled into their seats, looking forward to a short and uneventful flight. Captain John Harris, an experienced pilot with over 20 years of flying under his belt, was at the helm, assisted by First Officer Sarah Kim and a skilled cabin crew. At 11 a.m., the MD-11 taxied down the runway, its powerful engines roaring to life. The aircraft soared into the sky, cruising smoothly at 35,000 feet as it made its way up the East Coast. With clear weather reported along the flight path, the crew and passengers had no reason to expect anything but a routine journey. Just over halfway into the flight, the calm journey took an unexpected turn. The cockpit warning lights began flashing as Captain Harris and First Officer Kim noticed something wrong with the plane's hydraulic system. The Maryland 11 relied on 3 separate hydraulic systems to control crucial parts of the aircraft, including the flaps, landing gear, and rudders. Any failure in this system could lead to catastrophic consequences. The pilots immediately switched to their backup systems, but the situation worsened when they realized that one of the backup hydraulic lines had also been compromised. Captain Harris calmly informed the passengers about a slight technical issue. But behind the scenes, the crew was dealing with a rapidly escalating emergency. With 2 of the plane's hydraulic systems failing, Captain Harris had no choice but to declare an emergency. Air traffic controllers cleared the skies around Flight 50, giving them immediate priority to land at the nearest suitable airport. The crew decided to divert to Raleigh-Durham International Airport, located approximately 200 miles to the west. The tension in the cabin rose as passengers realized something was wrong. Flight attendants, trained for these moments, reassured them, urging everyone to remain calm and follow instructions. The passengers, though nervous, trusted the professionalism of the crew. As the aircraft began its emergency descent toward Raleigh-Durham, the situation became more dire. The final hydraulic system failed, leaving the MD-11 almost entirely unresponsive. Captain Harris and First Officer Kim struggled with the controls as the plane veered unpredictably. An alarm sounded throughout the cockpit. They knew that landing the aircraft would now require precision and nerves of steel. With no functioning hydraulic systems, Captain Harris was left to perform a high-risk maneuver, landing the plane without the ability to fully control its speed or angle of descent. As the MD-11 approached the runway, it swayed dangerously from side to side. Harris focused every bit of his experience and skill on keeping the aircraft as stable as possible. The plane touched down hard, its wheels hitting the tarmac with a loud thud. The landing gear, partially compromised by the hydraulic failure, struggled to hold the aircraft steady. Sparks flew as the MD-11 skidded along the runway, but miraculously, Harris managed to bring the aircraft to a stop, just short of the end of the runway. The National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) immediately launched an investigation into the hydraulic failure, discovering that a manufacturing defect had led to the collapse of the system. The incident prompted American Airlines and other airlines operating the MD-11 to perform urgent inspections and modifications to their aircraft, ensuring the safety of future flights. Captain Harris and his crew were hailed as heroes for their skill and composure in a situation that could have ended in disaster. American Airlines Flight 50 became a textbook example of how quick thinking and training can avert catastrophe, even the most dire of circumstances. The incident on Flight 50 left an indelible mark on the aviation industry. It underscored the importance of regular maintenance checks and reinforced the need for hydraulic system redundancies. The heroic actions of Captain Harris and First Officer Kim became a part of aviation history, with their story serving as a reminder of how every flight relies on the skill, knowledge and expertise of its crew to overcome the unexpected. Introduction on June 21, 1997, American Airlines Flight 50. A McDonnell Douglas MD-11 was scheduled to fly from Miami, Florida, to John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. It was a clear day, with no forecasted storms along the eastern seaboard. On board were 165 passengers, a mixture of families, business travelers, and tourists, eager to reach their destination. At the controls was Captain John Harris, a seasoned pilot with more than 2 decades of flying experience. He was known among his peers for his calm demeanor in the cockpit. Alongside him was First Officer Sarah Kim, relatively new to the MD-11 but a sharp and competent aviator. The flight's cabin crew, led by Chief Flight Attendant Laura Martinez, was equally experienced, ensuring passengers were comfortably settled in for the journey. The boarding process at Miami International Airport was smooth. Passengers chatted excitedly as they stowed away their luggage and found their seats. The Maryland 11's engines roared to life at 11 a.m., signaling the start of what was expected to be a routine flight. Captain Harris exchanged pleasantries with his crew as the aircraft taxied to the runway, unaware of the trial that awaited them in the skies. As the aircraft ascended, the passengers enjoyed a serene view of the Atlantic coastline. The sunlight gleamed off the wings of the MD-11 as it reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The flight attendants began serving drinks and everything seemed perfectly normal. In the cockpit, Harris and Kim discussed flight plans and upcoming weather, confident that the trip would be as uneventful as thousands of others they had completed. Miami to New York was a well-traveled route, and the calm weather forecast added to their confidence. The passengers relaxed, unaware that this routine flight was about to take a terrifying turn. Roughly an hour into the flight, as they passed over the Carolina coastline, a warning light suddenly blinked on the MD-11's dashboard. It was a hydraulic system alert. Captain Harris's calm expression turned serious as he checked the gauges. He tapped the control panel and spoke to First Officer Kim, who began scanning for backup options. For the average person, a hydraulic system might not sound like a critical component, but on a commercial airliner like the MD-11, the hydraulic system controlled almost everything: flight controls, landing gear, and braking systems. Losing one hydraulic system was a concern, but not an emergency. That's why modern planes have multiple redundant hydraulic systems. Harris and Kim remained composed, following procedure. They rerouted control to the secondary hydraulic system, trusting it to keep the aircraft stable. Meanwhile, they informed air traffic control that they were experiencing a minor issue but did not declare an emergency. The passengers remained blissfully unaware of the mechanical failure unfolding in the cockpit. Minutes later, the cockpit warning lights flickered again. Another hydraulic failure. This time it was System 2. Harris and Kim stared at the panel in disbelief. It was rare for even one hydraulic system to fail, but 2. That was nearly unheard of. First Officer Kim frantically checked the backup system, but it was too late. Both hydraulic systems were now compromised. Without these, the MD-11 had limited control over its most critical functions, including flaps, rudders, and landing gear. Their situation had gone from a manageable technical issue to a full-blown emergency. In the cabin, passengers began to notice the subtle change in the flight's atmosphere. The flight attendants, while still professional, had adopted a more serious tone. Laura Martinez exchanged glances with her team, recognizing that something was wrong. Passengers in the back felt a slight turbulence, and some started whispering nervously. In the cockpit, Captain Harris knew he had to act fast. He grabbed the radio and contacted air traffic control. American 50 declaring an emergency. We've lost 2 hydraulic systems. Diverting to Raleigh-Durham, Harris said, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. A TC quickly cleared the skies around Flight 50, directing them to the nearest airport capable of handling such an emergency. Harris informed the passengers with a calm announcement that they were diverting due to a technical issue. The plane would land at Raleigh-Durham International Airport, about 200 miles away. As Flight 50 began its emergency descent, the situation deteriorated further. The final hydraulic system, their last line of defense, began losing pressure. Now, the aircraft was barely responding to the pilot's commands. Captain Harris knew he had limited control over the aircraft's speed and descent rate. In the cabin, the once calm passengers were now growing visibly anxious. Some passengers whispered prayers, clutching armrests as the plane swayed unnaturally in the air. The flight attendants, trained for emergencies, reassured passengers while mentally preparing for the worst-case scenario, a crash landing. The Raleigh-Durham ground crew mobilized. Fire trucks, ambulances, and emergency personnel lined the runway, ready for whatever might happen when Flight 50 touched down. They knew that an MD-11 without hydraulic control could easily skid off the runway or crash on landing. In the cockpit, the tension was palpable. Harris fought the controls, trying to keep the MD-11 on course. First Officer Kim worked quickly, rerouting power to the manual flight control systems. The plane descended rapidly, swaying side to side as the pilots struggled to maintain stability. As the runway came into view, Harris knew this landing would be unlike any he had ever performed. Without functioning hydraulics, the MD-11 would have to rely on manual control and sheer luck. He could only partially control the landing gear, and the flaps weren't functioning properly, meaning the aircraft would be coming in at a much higher speed than normal. With sheer determination, Harris lined the aircraft up with the runway. The Maryland 11 hit the tarmac hard. The landing gear, partially compromised, struggled to absorb the impact. Sparks flew as the aircraft's underbelly scraped along the runway. The screeching of metal against pavement filled the cabin, and the smell of burning rubber made passengers fear the worst. For what felt like an eternity, the plane skidded down the runway, veering dangerously from side to side. Emergency vehicles rushed alongside it, prepared for a fiery crash. But miraculously, Captain Harris managed to keep the plane under control. As the MD-11 came to a shuddering stop, just short of the end of the runway, the cabin erupted into applause and cheers. They had made it. The emergency responders were on the scene within seconds. Passengers, though shaken, were unharmed. The crew efficiently evacuated everyone from the aircraft, and the passengers disembarked into the arms of waiting medics and airport staff. There were no injuries, an extraordinary outcome, given the circumstances. The NTSB investigation that followed revealed that a rare manufacturing defect in the hydraulic systems had caused the cascading failure. American Airlines, along with other airlines operating MD-11s, immediately grounded similar aircraft for inspections. Captain Harris, First Officer Kim, and the entire crew were lauded as heroes for their calmness under pressure and their ability to safely land a nearly uncontrollable aircraft. Their story became a case study in pilot training programs worldwide.